MIDI sequencers. Let's talk about what MIDI sequencers are. They record and they play back MIDI information. In the early days, it was a separate piece of gear that was the sequencer. Now it's all embodied in your computer, but we used to use separate pieces of gear to do the sequencing, and just like you'd use a tape recorder, basically. It was a separate piece of gear just to record and play back MIDI information. You could edit MIDI information. You could copy and paste MIDI information because it was just digital information. And if you knew where one chorus was, you could take that information and paste it into a second chorus. The control keyboard was used as a separate keyboard that just controlled MIDI data to enter into the recorder, which was the MIDI sequencer. And then the sequencer would play back multi-channel MIDI information to other sound generators. So MIDI could be copied, pasted, made it a whole lot easier to come up with a song idea, come up with a verse and a chorus, and then just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste until it sounds like a song arrangement and go, yeah, I like that or I don't like that. And then you could keep it for a later time. You come up with another idea, you could just create an 8-bar or 16-bar bridge and insert it wherever you wanted to. So it made the songwriting process really much easier. A lot of the early Madonna stuff was done with outboard sequencers. And you could loop, you could time transpose, you could actually quantize because it was just digital information that you could move around. You could randomize the feel. You could say, I want it to be close to the perfect tempo, but I want the notes to be a little behind the beats. So you could make it feel real. At least that was the whole idea of randomization of feel. And then the data could be backed up and stored on an external device for later use or to bring to another studio. So it was really handy to have. And this is how it would be hooked up. You'd have a keyboard feeding into the MIDI sequencer to enter your MIDI data. Since you're just playing performances, if it was drums you were playing, you'd just hit the keys like they were drums. If it was bass, you'd play a bass keyboard. If it was a regular keyboard, you'd play multi-note chords. And then it would feed into an outboard sound generator, then through to the next one, then through to the next one. So the through port was just sort of a feed through so you could get to other sound generators. So it was great for the guy that was sitting in his project studio where he was writing songs and he could come up with all the parts for the band all at once. Rather than having to be just the keyboard player, he could play the drums, he could have all of his ideas come to life. MIDI setup with a computer was basically the same kind of concept, except the keyboard would play into the computer to program the MIDI data. Computer would store it and arrange it, you can edit it, and then play it back through your keyboard, and then it would loop into the other keyboards. Same sort of process. The computer was just used as a MIDI sequencer. So this is what a sound module would look like. I forgot. You probably have never seen one. This is a rack space keyboard, and you could get in there and it probably had 128, 256 different kinds of sounds, different sound banks, some drums, some keys, some strings, some vocal sounds, all that kind of stuff. I gotta say, some of these old sound generators really sound cool these days. You can get them as plugins now, but it was pretty great where you could just go to the sound generator and adjust the envelopes in the sound generator to program your own sounds. And needless to say, people would try to get everybody else's sounds. That was like the thing at the time. Types of controllers. Any keyboard with MIDI out can be a controller. There's wind controllers, so it looks like a wind instrument that you play. It can capture pitch information, pressure information, how hard you're blowing into it. All that kind of stuff can be captured in MIDI. Drum machine controllers, Octapad, Drumcat, drum pads, they all work too. So if you hit the pad harder or quieter, it captures different performance information. And then later you can change the sounds of what drum you want to use. And these are the controllers that are used by people that aren't necessarily keyboardists. Keyboardists usually use a keyboard, but they had all these different kinds of controllers, even stringed controllers. So guitar, violin, viola, cello controllers, foot switches, physical motion controllers, so, dance or air drums, keyboard and mouse controller, or any other way that you can enter MIDI data into the computer. We haven't even talked about how you can do it just with a regular keyboard and a mouse. Controllers were a little more sophisticated than just the average synthesizer. They actually have all these parameters that you can adjust to get the data into the computer or the sequencer. Wind controllers look something like this. Pad controllers look something like that. String controllers look something like this. So MIDI control services is another thing that is extremely useful for MIDI. System exclusive MIDI data can be used in recording consoles. The console can be automated. So if you want the channel to turn on and off with mutes or solos, levels, sends, returns, all those things can be automated using MIDI. All you have to do is program it in, and you can use your computer to do that, or the control surface itself. So you turn a knob, it controls your performance of what you just did, records it, and then it can play it back and do the same thing over for you. You could come back to a mix and alter it later, which was a very costly process. If you were in a studio in the 70s or 80s and doing a mix, to come back because you just didn't make the vocal quite loud enough, you'd have to come back and take a day to reset everything up just to raise the vocal level just a little bit. With MIDI control services, this changes the whole dynamic of mixing because your computer can just bring back your mix, know all your moves, and just recreate what you did. It's second nature now in your computer. You just save the session and come back to it anytime. But that was a huge game changer for mixing when MIDI came along and you could use MIDI control surfaces. Other kinds of MIDI effects that used system exclusive information were harmonizers, and SPX 90 was the first multi-effects unit. They could do everything from delays and reverbs, flanging, phasing, all those kinds of effects. And it was great because you could just step on a foot pedal if you were a guitar player and have a rack of these effects. And a lot of the guitar players would bring in racks of gear with MIDI controllers with tons of switches that they could just step on and try different sounds and see how it fit into the music. So this is a list of some of the equipment that had MIDI system exclusive information. Other uses for MIDI system exclusive. Now this is really interesting because they've taken this concept to another level now, other than just performance capture. They've started using MIDI wireless, using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. You can use sample dump standards, so you can transport samples from one studio to another and dump your entire sample library into another sequencer. Timestamp tells when events happen for synchronization. MIDI show control. This really fascinates me. They use MIDI show control for synchronization of lights and playback and motion devices in live performances. Now, a timecode. That became really, really important because it had song pointer position. So you could go anywhere in the song, start the sequencer, and it would know exactly where you were at, and all of the synthesizers would immediately be in the right place. So all of the performances would be synchronized. So just so that we don't confuse things, let's be really clear. MIDI and digital audio are entirely different things. Even though MIDI is also digital, and digital audio is also digital, they're both different. MIDI digital encoding of performance parameters, where digital audio encodes analog audio signals. Both can record multi-track format, both can sequence samples, but they're entirely different. So common softwares include both capabilities.